Solve each equation. Again, I'm going to, if you want to put a line through this, these are quadratic equations. When we solve them, they will be right. Unlike the square root equations where sometimes you'll get an extraneous root, on quadratic equations, when you solve them, your answers are correct. Now, the difference between the questions here and the ones we did yesterday, like in part A, do you see that you have an x squared? But that's the only, you don't have an extra x. It's just an x squared. And if you had to solve something like, ooh, x squared equals 9, what would you do? You'd square root both sides. So when you just have one thing squared, you can use the strategy of square rooting both sides if you can get the thing that's squared by itself. So for example, in 3x squared minus 7 equals 8. Could I get the x squared all by itself? Yes. I can move the 7 over. I could divide both sides by 3, and I would get the x squared all by itself. Then to solve for x, we square root both sides. What happens when you square root both sides? You have to remember the plus or minus. And so this has two answers, and they both work. I divided both sides by 3. If you'd like, you can show that. Divide by 3, divide by 3. If you have something bigger squared, like here I have x plus 3 all squared equals 20. Okay? If I have something bigger squared, and I can get that bigger thing squared all by itself, how could I get rid of the squared sign? Square root. If I square root both sides here, I have to remember the plus or minus. And what happens on this side? It just becomes x plus 3. How would I get x by itself? Minus 3 on both sides. And we're almost going to leave our answer like this, but unfortunately we can simplify it. How do you simplify the square root of 20? Square root of 20 is 2 root 5. They didn't do that with their answer? They should have. You can go down to the answer at the bottom and write minus 0.5, because they would lose a half a mark for not simplifying completely. But we will simplify completely. So you might find in some of the answer key they're not simplifying completely, but we will. So we can get rid of something squared by square rooting both sides. And in this case, that is the best way to solve it. And we get answers sometimes that have square roots. All right. Just question 4 for practice, and we're going to do an activity right now.